The Princess's Fall. The night sky above planet Solara was a sea of endless stars, but for Princess Lyra, it was the last time she would see her home. She stood in the grand royal court, surrounded by the powerful leaders of her empire. Her silver hair shimmered under the glowing orbs of light that floated above the courtroom. But tonight, the light did not shine for her. Tonight, she was a traitor in the eyes of her people. Princess Lyra, you have betrayed Solara. The High Chancellor's voice echoed through the hall. You will be exiled. You will never return. Lyra clenched her fists. I did not betray my people. It is a lie. But no one listened. The council had already decided her fate. She looked at her father, King Valen, but his cold golden eyes did not waver. He had already abandoned her. The guards grabbed her arms, their metal grips tight against her skin. She struggled, but it was useless. You were once our future, the High Chancellor said, shaking his head. Now, you are nothing. And with that, they dragged her away. A fall from grace. The ship was silent except for the hum of the engines. Lyra sat alone in the prison chamber, her hands bound in energy cuffs. She replayed the events in her mind. The betrayal, the accusations, the cold stare of her father as he let her go. They said she had plotted against the Empire, that she had spoken of peace with the humans, Earth's weak, primitive species. It was a lie. The real traitors were still inside the palace, laughing at how easily they had removed her. The ship suddenly shook. The alarms blared, red lights flashing around her. What is happening? She whispered. Then, boom. An explosion rocked the ship, throwing her against the cold metal walls. The guards outside her cell shouted in panic. The ship was going down. Before she could react, the door ripped open. The force sent her flying out of the chamber, down the narrow corridors. The last thing she saw before darkness took over was the sight of the burning sky as she fell, lost on a strange world. Lyra woke up to the sound of wind howling through the trees. Pain shot through her body as she tried to move. Her head throbbed, and she could feel warm blood dripping down her arm. Her royal armor was shattered, her once perfect suit now torn and useless. She struggled to sit up, her vision blurry. She was no longer on the ship. She was on a strange planet. Then she remembered. The crash. The betrayal. The exile. Her breath came in sharp gasps. They had left her here to die. The air was thick with moisture, the ground soft beneath her hands. She could hear strange sounds in the distance, alien creatures moving through the trees. She was not alone. Lyra pushed herself up, forcing her legs to move. She had to find shelter, had to survive. But before she could take another step, a sharp click echoed behind her. She froze. Someone was there, watching her. Slowly, she turned her head. A human stood before her, holding a weapon aimed at her chest. He was tall, his dark uniform worn but strong. His face was rough with scars, his sharp eyes filled with suspicion. His finger rested on the trigger. A soldier, a human soldier. Lyra stared at him, her heart pounding. She had been taught that humans were weak, that they were nothing more than insects beneath Solara's power. But this one did not look weak. He did not fear her. He did not run. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and said, "Who the hell are you?" A human's mercy. The sharp edge of cold steel pressed against Princess Lyra's throat. She did not move. Her golden eyes locked onto the human standing before her. His grip on the blade was steady, his stance strong. He was not afraid of her. This was not how she imagined her first encounter with a human. Back on Solara, they taught that humans were primitive, unworthy, and fragile. But this man did not look fragile. His dark uniform was torn from battle, his skin marked with scars that spoke of a hard life. His weapon, a simple human-made combat knife, was pressed firmly against her skin, ready to strike if she made the wrong move. She was the alien here. She was the intruder in his world, and she was at his mercy. The human soldier. Who the hell are you? The human asked, his voice low and dangerous. Lyra's throat was dry. She did not answer. His eyes studied her alien features, her silver hair, golden eyes, and the glowing veins beneath her pale skin. He knew she wasn't human. The wind howled through the trees around them. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of growling creatures echoed through the forest. This planet was not safe for either of them. I should kill you right now, the human said. Lyra narrowed her eyes. Then why haven't you? A flicker of hesitation. She saw it, the slight pause in his breath, the moment of indecision in his eyes. He didn't want to kill her. Not yet. A broken warrior. The human stepped back, lowering his knife slightly. You're hurt, he muttered. Lyra staggered but refused to fall. I don't need your help. But her body betrayed her. Pain shot through her leg as she took a step, and she collapsed to her knees. The human cursed under his breath. He should have left her there. He had no reason to help an alien, an enemy. But instead, he did something unexpected. He sighed, then reached down. Lyra flinched as his rough hands grabbed her arm. She expected him to hurt her, to take her prisoner, to demand answers. Instead, he pulled her up. Her eyes widened. Why are you helping me? The human didn't answer right away. He simply slung her arm over his shoulder, supporting her weight. Because I don't believe people to die, he finally said. Even enemies. Trust is a dangerous thing. They moved through the forest in silence. Lyra's mind raced. This human, whoever he was either a fool or something more dangerous than she imagined. She knew his kind had no love for Exilorans. Her people had invaded Earth, conquered its skies, and crushed its armies. And yet here he was, helping her. Finally, she spoke. What is your name, human? He glanced at her. His sharp eyes studied her, as if trying to decide whether she was worth answering. Finally, he muttered, Daniel, Captain Daniel Carter. A human captain, a soldier, a man who had likely fought against her people. And now, the man who had saved her life. Lyra swallowed hard. She had never owed anything to a human before. But now she did. And she hated it. The bounty hunters arrive. Just as Lyra was about to ask more, Daniel froze. His body went tense, his hand moving to his sidearm. What is it? Lyra whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched. He pointed to the sky. Lyra followed his gaze, and her breath caught in her throat. A Xyloran scout ship hovered above the treetops, its blue lights scanning the ground. Her people had come, but not to save her. They had come to kill her. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. Looks like you're not the only one stranded here, princess. Lyra's heart pounded. For the first time, she realized the truth. She was no longer a princess. She was no longer Xyloran. She was just a fugitive, and the only one who could help her was a human. Enemies on both sides. The night air was thick with tension. Daniel crouched low, his sidearm steady in his hands. Beside him, Princess Lyra did the same, her golden eyes locked onto the sky. Above them, the Xyloran scout ship hovered like a silent predator, its blue lights sweeping across the dark forest. It wasn't searching for just anyone. It was looking for her. Daniel clenched his jaw. So much for laying low. Lyra was breathing hard, but not from fear. There was anger in her eyes, the kind of anger that came from betrayal. They didn't come to rescue me, she muttered. No kidding, Daniel whispered back. They came to finish the job. For a moment, she was silent. Then she turned to him, something unreadable in her expression. And what about you, human? She asked. Are you going to finish the job too? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he cocked his gun and scanned the tree line. Right now, we have bigger problems. Because it wasn't just the Xyloran bounty hunters that were hunting them tonight. It was his own people too. The silent war begins. Daniel had spent years fighting wars across the galaxy. He knew the signs. The broken twigs, the shift in the wind, the silence where there should be sound. There were others in the forest. Human soldiers. Lyra must have sensed it too, because she stiffened beside him. "You're being hunted," she whispered. Daniel exhaled. "No, we are being hunted." They were trapped between two forces, the Accelerant bounty hunters who wanted to erase Lyra, the Earth military who would never trust him for helping an alien fugitive. Neither side would hesitate to kill them both. The first shot. A sudden click echoed through the trees. Daniel reacted instantly, grabbing Lyra and diving behind a fallen log just as gunfire exploded in the night. Bright blue Accelerant plasma bolts streaked through the darkness, slicing through trees like paper. Red human bullets answered back, tearing through the undergrowth. And just like that, the war had begun. Daniel pulled Lyra down beside him. "We have to move. Now." She gritted her teeth. "They're not here for you," she hissed. "I should go." "No. Bad idea." Daniel cut her off. "If they find you, you're dead. And if they find me with you, I'm dead." She frowned but didn't argue. For once, a dangerous escape. They crawled through the underbrush, staying low as gunfire raged around them. Daniel's mind worked fast. They needed a way out. He turned to Lyra. "You're Accelerant. You must have some tech on you. Something that can." "No," she interrupted. "My power core was destroyed in the crash. I have nothing." Daniel muttered a curse. They were on their own. Then he saw it. A small broken-down human transport vehicle hidden beneath the trees. Rusted, probably abandoned for years. But it was their only chance. He pointed. "That's our way out." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "That ancient machine. You got a better idea." She sighed. "Fine. But if we die, I'm blaming you." Daniel smirked. "Get in line." A human and an alien against the world. They sprinted toward the vehicle, dodging bullets and plasma fire. Daniel slid into the pilot's seat, desperately trying to start the old engine. It coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Lyra jumped in beside him, gripping the dashboard as the vehicle lurched forward. Behind them, the Accelerant bounty hunters turned, their ship hovering into pursuit. The human soldiers opened fire, trying to stop them both. Daniel gripped the wheel. "Hold on, princess. This is gonna get messy." Lyra braced herself. She had never trusted a human before. But tonight, her life was in his hands. And for some reason, she didn't hate it. The bond grows. The wind roared against the vehicle as it raced through the dark forest. Daniel gritted his teeth, hands gripping the controls as the old machine lurched over the rough terrain. The wheels skidded on the damp soil, sending dirt and debris flying behind them. Beside him, Princess Lyra held on for dear life. Her silver hair was wild, her golden eyes sharp as she glanced back at their pursuers. The Accelerant scout ship was right behind them, its plasma cannons charging up. And further back, Earth's military patrols were closing in too. They were being hunted from both sides. "How fast can this thing go?" Lyra snapped. Daniel smirked. "Fast enough, if you pray hard enough." "I don't pray." "Then hold on." He slammed his foot down. The engine roared, sending them surging forward just as a plasma blast exploded behind them. Nowhere to run. The chase tore through the abandoned wastelands at the edge of the forest. Daniel weaved between broken ruins, his instincts razor-sharp. Lyra turned to him, breathless. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Avoid getting killed." Daniel chuckled, his gaze locked on the road ahead. Experience. For a moment, she just watched him. This human soldier had saved her life more than once already. He had no reason to, yet he did. She wasn't sure if that made him brave or foolish. Maybe both. The moment of truth. The Accelerant ship was too fast. It swooped lower, cutting off their escape. A voice crackled through a hidden calm inside Lyra's armor. "Princess Lyra," a cold, mechanical voice said, "your exile is final. Surrender, and your death will be painless." She went rigid. Daniel glanced at her. "Friend of yours?" "No," she whispered. "That is an execution squad." Daniel cursed. "Of course it is. The bounty hunters weren't here to capture her. They were here to erase her existence. Her people had betrayed her, and now they wanted to erase her completely." For the first time since she landed on Earth, she felt it. True fear. A deadly betrayal. Daniel turned the wheel sharply, taking them off-road. But the scout ship followed, its weapons charging up for a direct hit. They had seconds before they were blown apart. Lyra's mind raced. She had to do something. She had to stop them before it was too late. She turned to Daniel. "I need a comlink," she said. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Why?" She hesitated. Then she made a choice. To call for help. Daniel's gut twisted. He knew that tone. He had heard it before, from soldiers who swore they wouldn't betray their squad. And then they did. "You're signaling your people, aren't you?" Daniel's voice was deadly calm. Lyra didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Because the second she activated her distress beacon, the Accelerant ship's attack stopped. And Daniel knew. She had betrayed him. The cost of trust. The scout ship hovered, no longer firing. A second signal pinged on Daniel's scanner. Another ship was approaching fast. Lyra had called them. She had betrayed him to save herself. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white. "I should throw you out of this damn vehicle," he muttered. Lyra swallowed hard. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice," Daniel said coldly. "You just made yours." For the first time, she felt ashamed. Daniel had saved her. Again and again. He had put himself in danger for her, and she had just handed him over to his enemies. The tables turned. The second Accelerant ship arrived, landing smoothly on the barren ground ahead. Lyra's heart pounded. Was this her way back home, or was it just another trap? The ship's door hissed open, and standing there, in regal battle armor, was High General Terran, one of the most feared warlords in the Empire. He smirked. Well, Princess, you survived longer than expected." Lyra's blood ran cold. Something was wrong. Daniel, still gripping the controls, exhaled slowly. He knew this look. He had seen it in war. Lyra wasn't being rescued. She was being disposed of. One last chance. Terran's cold gaze shifted to Daniel. "And you," he sneered. "A human soldier. How pathetic." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, funny, because you're the one hiding behind a gun." Terran's eyes flashed with rage. Enough. He lifted his weapon, aiming straight at Lyra. "You are no longer a princess," he said. "You are a mistake." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. It hit her all at once. She wasn't going home. She was never going home. And Daniel was the only one who had ever truly helped her. Her people had rejected her, but Daniel had saved her, again and again, and she had betrayed him for nothing. A new choice. Lyra moved before she could think. In one swift motion, she grabbed Daniel's sidearm and turned. Bang! The shot echoed through the air. Terran staggered back, his armor sparking where the bullet hit. His soldiers froze in shock. Daniel blinked. "Did you just?" Lyra grabbed his hand. "Run," she whispered. Then they were gone, vanishing into the shadows as the soldiers recovered from their shock. They ran, side by side. Not as enemies, not as a soldier and a fugitive, but as allies. Maybe even something more. The battle for survival. The night was alive with fire. Blazing plasma bolts tore through the trees. Bullets ricocheted off metal ruins. The ground shook with the force of explosions. Princess Lyra and Captain Daniel Carter ran for their lives. Behind them, two armies clashed, Accelerant bounty hunters and human soldiers. but neither side cared about the battle. They wanted only one thing: Lyra dead, Daniel captured. The stars above were hidden behind smoke and fire. The world was closing in, and they were running out of time. No way out. Daniel skidded behind a crumbling concrete wall, gripping his gun. Lyra collapsed beside him, breathing hard. "This," she gasped, "is insane." Daniel peeked over the rubble, watching the chaos. "Welcome to my world, princess." Lyra wiped sweat and blood from her forehead. She had spent her whole life training to be a ruler, a diplomat, a leader. But this was survival, and she wasn't sure if she would make it out alive. "Hunted," a deep mechanical voice echoed through the battlefield. "Princess Lyra, you cannot surrender, and your death will be swift." Daniel looked at her. "That one of your friends?" Lyra's face was pale. "That is Terran's enforcer unit. It does not stop. It does not feel. It only kills." "Great," Daniel muttered. "I was hoping for something easy today." The ground shook as something heavy moved through the wreckage. A massive Celeran war machine, sleek and spider-like, stalked through the flames, its glowing red eyes scanning the battlefield. It found them, and it charged. The last stand. Daniel shoved Lyra aside, just as the war machine fired a plasma blast. The explosion sent him flying. Pain erupted in his ribs as he hit the ground. His vision blurred. His ears rang. Through the smoke, he saw the war machine closing in. Lyra was on her feet, face twisted with rage. She did something unexpected. She ran toward it. A princess turns warrior. Lyra leaped onto the war machine's back, grabbing onto its metal plating. The Celeran voice hissed, "Foolish, UCANNOT." Lyra ripped open a panel and jammed her fingers into the machine's exposed circuits. Her body glowed with energy as she overrode its systems. Sparks erupted. The war machine staggered. Daniel, still on the ground, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You're hacking a killer robot with your bare hands," he coughed. Lyra gritted her teeth. "I was raised in the most advanced empire in the galaxy. You think I don't know how to shut down my own people's machines?" The war machine jerked violently. It let out a mechanical scream. And then it collapsed, its red eyes flickering dark. Silence. Daniel pushed himself up, staring. "Okay," he admitted. "That was impressive." Lyra flicked her silver hair back, breathing hard. "I told you. I'm not just some helpless princess." The final decision. More Acceleran ships were coming. More human forces were closing in. They had minutes before both sides wiped them out. Daniel looked at Lyra. "We have to leave. Now." Lyra hesitated. She stared at the Acceleran ships, her golden eyes filled with something unreadable. Her people had abandoned her. Her own father had cast her out. If she left with Daniel, there would be no going back. She swallowed hard, made her choice. "I'm with you," she whispered. Daniel didn't ask if she was sure. He just grabbed her hand, and together they ran into the unknown. Not as enemies, not as allies, but as survivors. The final stand. The night was ending, but the war had just begun. Daniel and Lyra ran through the burning ruins, their shadows stretching long beneath the rising twin moons. Smoke choked the air, and in the distance, the hum of warships grew louder. The Celeran bounty hunters had deployed more troops. The Earth's military had sent reinforcements. And caught in the middle of it all was a human soldier and an exiled alien princess. There was nowhere left to run. The escape plan. Daniel slammed a new energy cartridge into his rifle. "We need an exit now." Lyra scanned the battlefield, her golden eyes sharp. Her mind worked fast, calculating every possibility. Then she spotted it. A half-destroyed Celeran stealth craft, its engines flickering weakly in the distance. "If we can reach that ship, I can get us out of here, she said. Daniel gave a short laugh. Stealing an enemy ship. I like the way you think. Lyra smirked. Try to keep up, human. They sprinted toward the craft. But they weren't alone. The bounty hunters saw them. The human forces saw them. And suddenly, everyone was gunning for them. The betrayal. The moment they reached the ship, Lyra's heart sank. Standing between them and their escape was General Terran, his golden Celeran armor reflecting the firelight. A dozen elite warriors flanked him, weapons aimed and ready. Terran shook his head. You never knew when to surrender, Princess. Lyra's fingers tightened into fists. I was never meant to serve cowards. Terran's expression hardened. You still don't understand, do you? He gestured to the battlefield. The Empire doesn't care about you. The humans don't care about you. You are nothing. Daniel cocked his gun, stepping forward. She's more than you'll ever be. Terran sneered. A human defending the Celeran. How pathetic. Daniel smirked. Yeah, well, I never liked following the rules. Terran raised his weapon. Then you die together. The last fight. The first shot fired. Daniel shoved Lyra aside, rolling into cover as blaster fire rained down. The battle was chaos. Daniel fired precision shots, taking down Celeran guards one by one. Lyra dashed between enemy fire, using her agility to dodge attacks before striking back with deadly precision. Terran was a force of nature, his energy blade humming with deadly power as he cut through the battlefield. Then he charged at Lyra. The warrior princess. For the first time in her life, Lyra did not hesitate. Terran swung his blade, but she ducked, spinning behind him. She grabbed a fallen Celeran plasma sword, activating its glowing blue edge. Their blades clashed, sending sparks into the air. Terran struck fast. Lyra dodged faster. You were never strong enough to lead, he snarled. Lyra gritted her teeth. Then why are you losing? She drove her blade forward, piercing through his armor. Terran staggered back, eyes wide in shock. Lyra stepped closer, voice cold. You always thought I was weak. She twisted the blade. You were wrong. Terran collapsed. And just like that, the Empire's best warrior was dead. The final choice. Daniel rushed to Lyra's side as the last enemy fell. The ship was waiting. The Celeran forces were scattered. The Earth soldiers were closing in. They had one chance. Daniel turned to Lyra. If we leave now, there's no going back. Lyra looked at the burning battlefield. Her people had rejected her. Earth would never trust her. She had no home left. But when she looked at Daniel, she saw something else. A partner. A survivor. Maybe even a new purpose. She nodded. Then we don't go back. They raced into the ship, closing the hatch as the engines roared to life. The human forces opened fire, but it was too late. The ship blasted into the sky, vanishing into the stars. And for the first time since it all began, Lyra was free. Once rejected, now cherished. The stars stretched endlessly before them. Princess Lyra stood at the edge of the cockpit, her golden eyes locked onto the vastness of space. For the first time in her life, she was free. No royal duties. No betrayals. No empire controlling her fate. Behind her, Captain Daniel Carter leaned against the control panel, watching her in silence. You're quiet, he said. Lyra exhaled slowly. I was always told that space belongs to my people. She turned to face him. But standing here now, I think they were wrong. Daniel smirked. That's the first smart thing you've said since we met. She rolled her eyes, but for the first time she smiled. No home, no chains. The stolen Celeran stealth ship drifted beyond Earth's reach, its systems flickering as it recovered from battle. Daniel sat at the pilot's seat, flipping switches, checking fuel levels. This thing's not gonna last forever. Lyra folded her arms. Then we find something better. He glanced at her. "Oh, and what's your big plan, princess?" She hesitated. She had spent her whole life being told what her purpose was, that she was meant to rule, that she was destined to follow the empire's path. But now, she had no title, no throne, no home. And yet, she didn't feel lost. She looked at Daniel. She wasn't alone. Lyra's voice was steady. "I want to fight back." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Against who?" She met his gaze. "The ones who tried to kill us. The ones who think they own the galaxy." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Let me get this straight. You want to go after your own people. The empire that has thousands of ships, billions of soldiers, and a death squad hunting you." Lyra smirked. "Are you scared?" Daniel grinned. "Nah, just wondering how much fun this is gonna be." A war of their own. The ship's scanners beeped. Incoming transmissions. Lyra stepped forward, scanning the signals. One came from deep space. Coded. Secret. A rogue network resisting the Empire. One came from Earth. Restricted frequencies. A warning. "They know we're out here," Daniel muttered. Lyra studied the messages. The galaxy was already changing. The Empire wasn't as untouchable as it pretended to be. There were others out there, fighting in the shadows. Daniel crossed his arms. "So what's it gonna be, princess? We run, or we make some noise?" Lyra smiled. Not the smile of a royal, not the smile of a girl who had been cast aside, but the smile of a warrior. "We make noise." Daniel chuckled, reaching for the ship's controls. "Well then, let's get to work." The engines roared to life, pushing them toward the unknown. A human soldier, an exiled princess. A new kind of war. Not for a throne, not for revenge, but for something worth fighting for. And this time, they weren't losing.